Hi everybody, it's Rachel here from Teach First. I'm the Ambassador Communications Officer in the Network Development team, and I'm joined today by Leo, who works at Deloitte. Do you want to introduce yourself, Leo?
Yeah, hi Rachel. So I've been at Deloitte for 6 years now, having done Teach First in the 2015 cohort. I'm a senior consultant and I'm really looking forward to sharing my story.
Yeah, perfect. It's that's exactly what we're here today to obviously tell Leo's inspirational ambassador story. So we can kickstart. You're a 2015 training program ambassador. It'd be really great if you can tell us like an overview of your career journey from participating in the 2015 program to where you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it does seem like a really long time ago now, getting ready to graduate in 2015 and being a little bit overwhelmed by all of the different options that there were, but finding a really helpful graduate recruiter who was then able to explain to me what actually Teach First involved and get me through the process. So then, 2015 to 2017, I found myself in Hastings in East Sussex at the St Leonards Academy teaching general science, which was an amazing experience. Had an incredibly difficult first year, but then went on to have a second year where I felt like I was absolutely loving it, absolutely getting exactly what I wanted out of that. Then between those 2 years, I did a summer project at Deloitte at their consulting practice, and also found that there were things outside the classroom that I really enjoyed as well. So after that second year, I went to join Deloitte as an analyst on their graduate scheme. And that's where I've been since. And that's given me the opportunity to do lots of other things at the same time, directly connected with Teach First. So I'm, going to tell you in a minute about the Teach First network we've got at Deloitte, the other volunteering opportunities I've had, and then the opportunities to do things outside Teach First that I think are still connected to the mission too. So, the kind of I've done some volunteering for NGOs abroad, and all of the experience that I got in those 2 years has fed directly into what I've been able to do since.
That's so good to hear that, like, there'll be a lot of ambassadors watching who are in the classroom, considering potentially heading out of the classroom and gaining an insight from yourself as to what that's about. I guess taking it back slightly, I'm interested to know what motivates you and inspired you in the first place to kind of get involved in supporting, the education of children and students in disadvantaged communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I probably, like many people, went into Teach First being a little bit naive. I was lucky enough to go to a really nice school in a really nice area, and then didn't realize that actually my experience was quite different to the experience that so many people have. And then just feeling that that was incredibly unfair. So my views from joining Teach First and thinking like, okay, like I'm here to be a teacher, to then actually transforming that into, okay, like there's a fundamental problem here that is a huge part of the teaching profession, but actually is a part of British society, like society much more widely, that I can do something about. And I think seeing the impact that I could have in the classroom in those 2 years was really inspiring and kind of made me feel like, okay, there's a lot that I personally can do about this. And then also having left the classroom and meeting so many different people doing different things. And, I'm sure at the ambassador gathering, I'll have a chance to meet lots more, but that's also then kept that inspiration going and meant that, I can be a part of something that is huge in tackling this real problem.
So that's so good, like that it's always been, yeah, something really strong and a part of kind of like everything that you do day in, day out. And I guess the fact that you've obviously, as I say, moved from being in the classroom into a business, I was wondering if you might be able to tell us a bit more about how that came about. You referenced the summer project. Um, yeah, how did that come about, and sort of how are you making a difference to kind of education more broadly?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, again, certainly like many of the people when I joined Teach First, I probably went in and felt as a graduate like I was quite naive, both about teaching, and about the other options that existed outside. So when there was the opportunity to do the summer project between my first and second years, I was really keen to do that because it was kind of a pathway that seemed very different, but also one that I've seen a lot of peers taking. And so just the complete change in experience then for those 2 weeks that I had in the summer kind of showed me that, okay, like there's a lot to experience here, but also in that summer project, I was able to work with people who had previously joined Deloitte who were also Teach First ambassadors, and then hear directly from them that there was still, that there was still a lot that other organizations can do to tackle education and equality on the Teach First mission. And since joining Deloitte, then I've been really lucky to be involved in kind of quite a few different initiatives where we've directly worked with schools and with students to be able to address like specific areas, around careers or around, skills that people in schools need, or indirectly where, we've worked with head teachers, or we've, found people speak at conferences. And so I just think the skills that I got in the classroom prepared me so well for this role that I'm doing now, where, you kind of think it's very different, but actually here I am kind of talking to people all day, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with kind of rapidly changing situations. All of the fundamental skills of teaching are actually hugely useful to what I do now.
And can you give a high level overview of what it is that you do as a day-to-day job, and like the sort of people that you're liaising with?
Yeah, absolutely. So my day-to-day role is I work with organizations who are wanting to change the way that they manage their finances, so their incoming payments, outgoing payments, what they're reporting. And so if they want new technology, if they want to restructure the teams that are doing that, then I work with them. And a lot of the role that I do is actually, what does it take to get people the training that they need to make sure they're comfortable with what's going to happen to them, and that actually the solution that they're getting is suitable. So again, I feel like I've just taken my skills that I got from the classroom and I'm applying them in a new context.
I think that's really important to understand as well, because if, say, for example, somebody were to just look at in writing, what the job role that you do like is about, they might not really appreciate how relatable some of these skills are, and like how
Yeah.
translatable, as you say.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember, like, in my interview for this role, I think I sat there through the whole interview and I only talked about my time teaching. And there's a lot of kind of questions and skills that you're supposed to be demonstrating, and I kind of walked out and thought, oh well, that's the I kind of think, you know fine, I've taught, like, that's not that relevant. What are they going to say about me? But actually all of the skills that I need to demonstrate were clearly able to be demonstrated through my time in the classroom.
And yeah, I think that's really cool that you can see, like, use those examples and showcase the similarities from a skill transfer point of view. But you're also involved in the Deloitte network with Teach First, that's correct, isn't it? And I'm just curious as to why you feel like the connection and like collaboration between businesses and enterprises, innovators, and schools, and those, like, even more broadly involved in kind of education system at large, is actually helping to support the education system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the network of ambassadors that we've got is so important, because a couple of the well, firstly, a couple of things that I touched on before, as in we've got a lot of work directly with schools, and a lot of that is actually run by ambassadors now. And that means that we're not just going into schools with, what somebody who's never worked in a school thinks a school needs. We're going into schools with somebody who's actually been there in that context, and they have the understanding of, okay, this is how you're going to help a teacher, a class get to that outcome. And so it's nice to be able to both like funnel as many people in as we can into these programs that actually give lots of people the opportunity to work with young people, but also know that it is really impactful because we've had that experience. And then on the other side, there's a lot of what individuals are doing then outside of the classroom, that I think is still very connected to the experience they've had in the classroom. And I think if you kind of speak to most ambassadors, they will have a similar experience to what I was relating, as in this has changed their views on education and on what we need in society. And so, we've got one of our network members who has actually just won a couple of awards for some of the amazing work she's doing on sustainable finance. And it's not immediately related to necessarily the classroom, but it's somebody as an ambassador who's then gone on to have a huge impact by, the opportunities of working in a large organization. And then I guess the third part that's been really good is just where we've been able to collaborate between like different businesses. So, I'm obviously in Deloitte, but there's a lot of organizations with huge amounts of ambassadors out there. And so, particularly kind of places like PwC, Accenture, the civil service, we've been able to support each other a lot in terms of both like what we're doing with our own networks and how we're trying to influence the business, but also then we've been able to set up a few things like we had a get together for first of all just the ambassadors in business, and then broadened that out with the innovation network to anyone who's interested in learning and discussing about the future of work. We've set up a podcast to talk about careers, and particularly careers that actually a lot of students might not traditionally be thinking of. So more kind of vocational options, and then just some more kind of out there things like I think there was one about a professional rugby player, and then also even just being able to then like share speakers and invite each other to each other's events has been hugely valuable. So I think that there's many ways that actually having this network of people has helped all of us.
Yeah, and I think obviously we touched upon so many examples there, but there's a few that I think are particularly like really important to kind of note even more, in sense of like the Future of Work event that you referenced. That happened in January earlier this year, wasn't it? And that was probably maybe the first time that, what was it, about 6 different networks pulled together, brought their resources, and enabled a bunch of pupils as well to come together at that event, discuss careers that would be useful and knowledgeable for the students to understand like what the future of work could look like for them. And like we had so much interest on Twitter about that from so many people that were at the event, and that's kind of that was born out of, as you say, that kind of meeting beforehand and collaborating over that time to get together to make sure that that's really happened. So I think that's really important. It shows the great collaboration that can happen when lots of similar like-minded people are really after the same goals here, which is to help others and help that kind of next generation see what opportunities are available. You mentioned obviously the podcast series as well. That was between yourself and, was it 3 ambassadors?
Yeah, absolutely. So we got together. So it was myself, it was someone from Accenture and someone from Heathrow, all ambassadors, and kind of wanted to understand what it was that we could do to actually focus on some of the gaps that there were in careers education. Yeah. And this was around the same time that Teach First was having themselves a real push on careers education and understanding what it would take schools to do to meet the Gatsby benchmarks, which is a set of benchmarks for what does good careers education look like. And we realized that actually, all of us had the opportunity to kind of leave teaching and experience other things, but there was probably a lack of resources for both students and teachers who were kind of then in the classroom for their entire careers. to understand, like, directly from someone involved in these other careers, like how they got there practically, you know, what do they do day to day,
Mm.
whether they would recommend it to people, and, you know, even just some kind of general advice for young people on what to do if they're not sure about what they want as a career. So we found that really successful. Like, it's called the Career Sphere. Do look it up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anything similar. I think we've got a few episodes out now and are planning a few more in the near future.
And was that, I mean, how did you even come about that, the three of you, you know, was whose idea, how did that kind of spark, you know?
I think I'm definitely going to call out Grace Griffiths from was at Accenture at the time and has now moved on. But we were all kind of together through COVID, and it actually kind of started then. Like, okay, nobody can actually meet up at the moment. Like, what is there that we can do in this environment?
Mm.
And then that almost kind of led on to our first event. So it's like, well, COVID is now, you know, partly at least in the past. And it would be lovely to get together with all of these people that we've met doing these things and actually be able to talk about some of these things in person.
Yeah, that was really cool, taking it from the kind of virtual world into now the kind of physical setting, and sort of, yeah, taking that forward. So yeah, it was such a incredibly difficult time for so many people, but particularly in education, and being able to have that resource, I think, to sort of listen into, must have been hugely valuable, and presumably you got that kind of feedback as well from people.
Yeah.
Obviously it's really great to hear the examples of that sort of impact that you're having, you know, through the networks, and sort of through Deloitte. Are there other ways that you're, like, have you got any other kind of examples of ways that you're making a difference to education and sort of helping to end educational inequality through the work that you do?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found most rewarding is actually at the school where I used to teach, now being a member of their local governing board. And I've taken on the role for responsibility for special educational needs there,
Mm.
and actually working with the coordinator for special educational needs that I used to work with as a teacher was such a nice experience, because actually then I'd suddenly seen both sides of what it meant to be interacting with these policies and what it meant to be setting these policies. And so I think there was a really nice dual role that I could play, both being really supportive in terms of understanding, you know, the challenges that this person was facing in a way that I think someone who would come from outside the context wouldn't necessarily be able to, but also then having both the understanding from when I was like working with these policies and working in the school, but also then what I can bring in professionally to help develop those. And I think, given that it was a particularly, you know, it was a time when the school was undergoing lots of change from the senior leadership, and the principal moved on, and so I was really happy then that I was able to be that point of continuity and to keep working through. And I think we've got a really nice result now. We've been able to actually put some real practical steps in place to make sure that actually we're addressing a wider range of special educational needs, but actually we're also then integrating that more into the mainstream of the school, which is a really nice achievement for us.
And I love that. I love that you've been able to, like, stay in touch with kind of where, you know, where you started your sort of teaching journey down in Hastings, obviously now sort of working in London. Like, it's a very different pace being there. I was born and raised in Hastings. I get exactly what, you know, it's like in that area. And yeah, I can only imagine that London's kind of a different life to live as well, but
Yeah, and
all very good experiences to bring to that role.
and I think I'd have, you know, if I'd come into that context without having been there for a couple of years, I think I would have felt like a bit of an outsider. Like, I think there would have been a real danger of actually, you know, when there's somebody who doesn't really understand the context, I think we probably both realize it's not hugely helpful a lot of the time. But
Mm.
then, having spent time in that community and in those in the classrooms of that school, then I think that was what meant that I was able to then have much more of an impact than on the local governing board.
And it's good that interesting you use that word community, because obviously we've talked a lot so far about obviously the networks, the community feel sort of there, and I guess the wider ambassador community that you're a part of, like how has being part of that either benefited you, or how have you supported others? Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, there's obviously a lot I've said about the community that exists where I work at the moment, and how we've interacted with other groups, and that's been amazing. And there's so many fantastic networks that exist. And then also outside of that, there's the individuals that I've met. And, again, one of the best things that I've done is become involved with a charity called 3D AMI, who coordinate 3D animation outreach for schools. And that's not something that I ever imagined that I'd be getting involved in, probably even when I was still teaching. But actually, again, when I was working at Deloitte, I decided it was over COVID that I really wanted to try something different. And so I applied again for a summer project and joined this organization that was founded by an ambassador and one other person. And then I went on to lead their kind of summer outreach camp that year. And then since then, I've been able to expand what they're doing into a couple of other pathways into 3D animation. So it was an organization that was amazing at getting people who were really set on actually a career in animation from all backgrounds and giving them support that they wanted. But then I've really enjoyed being able to come in and see what we can do for students who actually maybe had no experience of 3D animation before, because it's something that actually it probably requires, either a lot of research or some parental help to get into. And so there was a gap there in terms of actually what it meant for people from disadvantaged communities to be able to access. And so between our new kind of after school club model and then a train the trainer model, just in the last year, we've probably helped, 100 more students than would otherwise have been able to go on to our summer camp. And it's also been a really nice opportunity just to get back to interacting with students day to day again. I'm taking 2 weeks of leave from my work here this summer to go to likely Bath and run a residential 3D animation summer camp with 27 students, and I'm looking forward to it enormously. And that's just not something that I would have had the opportunity to do had I not been a part of this community and spent time actually meeting people and networking with others at some of these events.
Mad, isn't it, how you've been able to get into such a completely different, it's such a specialized area and sort of skill set, but what obviously you bring to it is enormously valuable as well. So it's just really cool to kind of be a part of, obviously. And I know I've mentioned this to you before, I don't know when you get time to sleep because you're involved in so many different things. It's very impressive, honestly. So you mentioned obviously earlier about the Great Ambassador Gathering. So yeah, that is obviously part of marking 20 years since Teach First began its the first cohort began Summit Institute. What does 20 years of Teach First mean to you?
I think that's probably the hardest question that we've had. But I think to me, 20 years of Teach First means 20 cohorts of people who all agree that educational disadvantage is a huge issue and have committed a significant chunk of their time and effort and a lot of emotional investment to solving. And then it's amazing to think of how many people there are who have been through this program, and then the size of the community that exists of ambassadors. And then I feel like I've had such enormous benefits from that community that I hope everybody else gets those same opportunities to meet people, to try new things, and just to do whatever they can that's still related to the Teach First mission.
Yeah, I like how, still obviously very much like looking forward to what can be done, what ways can we collaborate, what ways can we connect. So No, appreciate your time on this and answering all of my questions, and just telling us more about your story, because it's so interesting, the different areas that you've been involved in, and sort of what you're doing. And I have no doubt you'll be involved in so many different ways and means in the future. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from you in due course. And yeah, obviously it'll be great to meet one another in person as well at the gathering. And yeah, if you do want to hear more from Leo, come and have a chat with him. He'll be at the gathering. There's going to be an ambassadors in business kind of stall in the network zone, where him and others are going to be around to have a chat. And I hope you don't mind me saying, Leo, like, I know that you're keen to hear from others as well. So yeah, do
Yes,
come
please.
along, register for the 1st of July, the Great Ambassador Gathering. And yeah, bookmark the ambassadors in business stall to come and have a chat with Leo.
Amazing. Thank you.
No, thanks ever so much for your time. And yeah, can't wait to see you there.